Welcome grade 12 SYSCC students to this exclusive masterclass. Today, we're stepping right into the highly analytical realm of advanced macroeconomics. Our objective here is precise and it's rigorous. We are going to track the aggregate wealth of an entire nation and mathematically filter it down layer by layer until we reach the actual spending power that resides in an individual's wallet. So let's dive straight into this macroeconomic funnel and see exactly how broad national data translates into individual reality.
Here is our analytical pathway for today's session. First, deriving private income. Second, calculating personal income. Third, determining personal disposable income. And finally, analyzing per capita income.
Section 1. Deriving private income by isolating the private sector.
To begin our methodical stripping away of institutional wealth, we have to establish our baseline starting point. Think of this as the absolute widest part of our macroeconomic funnel. We're talking about national income, or net national product at factor cost, which is represented as NNP sub FC. This is the sum total of all domestic factor income plus the net factor income earned from abroad by normal residents. And crucially, this is strictly after making an allowance for depreciation. It represents the true net production of our economy, measured by the actual factor payments, wages, interest, rent, and profits, entirely without the distorting effects of indirect market taxes.
Now, starting from that massive national income figure, we have to make our first mathematical deductions. We literally can't calculate private income without removing the wealth that's permanently locked within the public sector. So we subtract income from property and entrepreneurship that accrues directly to government commercial enterprises and administrative departments. We also deduct the savings retained by non-departmental government enterprises. Because this wealth is totally unavailable for private distribution, it has to be completely removed from our private sector aggregate. But deduction is only half the equation, right? We also have to make specific additions. The private sector receives certain incomes that were not part of our original national income baseline, simply because they don't contribute to current output. We have to add the interest the government pays on the national debt. We also add net current transfers from the government. These are unilateral payments like old age pensions, unemployment relief, or scholarships. And finally, we add net current transfers from abroad, things like foreign gifts or grants. These unilateral transfer payments require no productive service in return, yet they mathematically and tangibly increase the private sector's aggregate wealth.
Section 2. Calculating personal income and reaching the individual.
It is absolutely essential that we rigorously delineate between these two aggregates. Private sector income is still way too broad. It includes massive pools of corporate wealth and retained corporate profits alongside everyday household incomes. Personal income, on the other hand, strips away that corporate wealth entirely. It represents strictly the income actually received by human persons from all sources during a given year. Simply put, corporate wealth is indeed private, but it is not a personal realization. So, how exactly do we get from private to personal? Well, it's a step-by-step mathematical deduction to clear out those corporate liabilities. First, we take our private income and subtract undistributed corporate profits. To put that into perspective for a second, in many modern economies, these retained corporate earnings can actually dwarf the total sum of aggregate household wages in a given quarter. It's a massive amount of wealth held back from personal hands. Second, we subtract the corporate profits tax, which goes straight back to the government. And finally, we subtract the retained earnings of foreign companies operating within our borders. Once we mathematically eliminate these corporate detentions of wealth, we are left with true personal income, the actual flow of funds directly to individuals. Section 3. Personal disposable income, the final spending power. All right, we're now at the absolute narrowest point of our macroeconomic funnel. We must transition from what an individual merely receives on paper to what they can legally and practically spend in reality. To find this ultimate spending power, known as personal disposable income or PDI, we systematically strip away the final administrative obligations. First, we take that aggregate personal income and subtract personal taxes, most notably direct income tax. Then we subtract miscellaneous receipts collected by government administrative departments. This covers everyday realities like administrative fees and legal fines. Once these final obligations to the state are cleared, the remaining balance is true personal disposable income. And here is the absolute macroeconomic finality. Every single remaining rupee of personal disposable income is strictly categorized into a zero-sum split. You can either spend it or you can save it. The equation is absolute. Households can do one of two things with this final disposable income: allocate it to household consumption or put it away as household savings.
Personal disposable income exactly equals consumption plus savings.
Section 4. Per capita income analyzed. Evaluating averages. You've definitely heard economists and policymakers cite per capita income, or PCI, all the time. By definition, PCI is the baseline average income of normal residents in a particular year. The formula is remarkably straightforward. You just take the total national income and divide it by the total population. It's a really simple average heavily relied upon globally to gauge a country's economic development and general welfare. But as we're going to see, simplicity definitely has its blind spots.
As advanced students of macroeconomics, we can never just accept surface-level metrics without a rigorous critique. Which brings us to a critical academic question. Does a higher per capita income strictly guarantee increased economic welfare for the individual? It's deeply tempting to assume that if the macro average goes up, the micro reality of the individual improves equally. But that assumption builds a potentially very flawed narrative.
When we rigorously test PCI against actual macroeconomic variables, its flaws as a pure welfare index become glaringly apparent. First, just look at population growth. If a nation's total income grows, but its population grows even faster, the actual per capita availability of goods and services falls, materially lowering the standard of living. Second, consider price inflation. If we measure GDP at current prices, we're looking at nominal GDP. An increase here might just mean prices are rising, creating a false sense of richness without a single new good being produced. To find true welfare, we have to use real GDP, which eliminates that distorting effect of inflation. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, income distribution. An average completely ignores inequality. A nation could have a soaring per capita income driven entirely by a massive surge in wealth for the top 1%, mathematically masking widespread poverty among the vast majority of individuals. So grade 12 students, as we conclude this masterclass on the macroeconomic funnel, I'll leave you with this provocative thought to analyze. If our economic models rely on averages that can so easily obscure the true economic reality of the individual, are we actually measuring national wealth or merely a statistical illusion? Keep questioning the aggregates.